A Rockford man is sentenced to more than 3 decades in prison for killing a Chicago rapper. 24-year-old Colton Kennecker faced life in prison for the murder. Earlier this week, a judge sentenced him to 32 years. Back in 2019, William Pickering's remains were found in rural Winnebago County. Pickering, also known as Billy the Kid, was beaten to death. Kennecker hit him in the head with a baseball bat several times, along with William Arzadi and Dakota Graff. Then the group dumped his body in a field. Graff was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Arzadi was also found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to natural life, but he never showed up for trial. And
On May 25, 2019, 23-year-old rapper William Pickering walked into a house believing he was meeting people he knew. He never walked back out. According to prosecutors, he was ambushed by 3 men armed with baseball bats, beaten to death, driven to a rural field, and his body was set on fire in attempts to erase every trace of the crime. For nearly a week, his family searched desperately for answers while he was listed as a missing person. Then on June 20th, investigators made a heartbreaking discovery in a field in Winnebago County, Illinois. This is the tragic story of William Pickering, better known to fans as EBE Bands or Billy the Kid, and the years-long investigation that eventually brought those responsible to justice. William Pickering was born in 1996 and grew up in northern Illinois. Friends and family described him as someone who loved music and was determined to build a career as a rapper. Performing under names EBE Bands and Billy the Kid, Pickering became known throughout the Chicago and Rockford drill music scene. His EBE name stood for East Side Boys Entertainment, a group he was closely associated with. Although he stood out as a white rapper in a predominantly black drill scene, he gained respect from many listeners because of his consistency and collaborations with well-known artists. Some of his best-known songs include Big B's, Fresh Out, and I'm Hot. He also collaborated with artists including G Herbo and Little Bibby, helping him build an underground following with millions of views online. At only 23 years old, many believed his music career was just beginning. On May 25, 2019, Pickering traveled to a residence on Indiana Head Avenue in Rockford, Illinois. According to prosecutors, the visit wasn't random. Investigators later determined that he had been lured there under false pretense. Inside the home, 3 men were allegedly waiting. Those men were William Artate, Dakota Graff, Colton Kennecker. Prosecutors said the attack began almost immediately. Kennecker allegedly struck Pickering in the head with a baseball bat as soon as he entered. Artate and Graff joined the assault. The beating continued until Pickering died from blunt force trauma to his skull. It was a violent attack that investigators later described as intentional and coordinated. Instead of calling for help, prosecutors said the 3 men loaded Williams' body into a truck. They drove to a remote field in Winnebago County. Once there, they attempted to destroy the evidence by setting his body on fire. Another man, Ramirez, later helped conceal the homicide after the murder had already occurred. Investigators said his involvement centered on helping cover up the crime rather than participating in the fatal beating itself. For days, Williams' loved ones had no idea where he was. On June 1, 2019, he was officially reported missing by the Rockford Police Department. As detectives began investigating his disappearance, they quickly uncovered evidence suggesting foul play. Nearly 3 weeks after the murder, on June 20th, investigators located burnt remains in the rural field in Winnebago County. The remains were identified as William Pickering. An autopsy concluded he had died from blunt force trauma to the skull before his body was burned. According to prosecutors, this was not a random killing. Court proceedings revealed the attack stemmed from monetary and personal disputes involving narcotics and stolen property connected to individuals who frequented at the house where the murder occurred. While every detail of the disagreement was not made public, prosecutors argued that the conflict escalated into a planned ambush. Within days of discovering Williams' remains, investigators arrested 4 people. Artate faced first-degree murder and concealment of homicidal death. However, after posting bond, he fled the country before trial. Despite being missing, prosecutors proceeded with a trial in absentia. A jury found him guilty. He was sentenced to natural life in prison plus 5 years. Nearly 5 years later, in May 2026, U.S. Marshals and FBI located Arzate in Mexico. He was extradited back to Illinois and booked into Winnebago County Jail on May 4, 2026 to begin serving his sentence. Prosecutors identified Kinnicker as the first attacker. Evidence presented in court alleging he struck William with the baseball bat before the other defendants joined in. Kinnicker also fled Illinois before his case concluded. Authorities later captured him in Mesa, Arizona in February 2021. In 2023, he was sentenced to 32 years in prison after pleading guilty to first-degree murder and obstructing justice. Graff admitted his role in the killing and disposal of William's body. He pled guilty and received a sentence of 35 years in prison. Ramirez was not accused of participating in the beating itself. Instead, prosecutors said he helped conceal the homicide after William had already been killed. He ultimately received a sentence of 180 days in jail for concealing a homicidal death.
Convicted of murder in Rockford, who didn't show up for trial, is now behind bars 5 years later. William Arzate was found guilty after a jury trial in 2021, but he was not there when the judge sentenced him to life in prison. Arzate was found in Mexico and brought back to Winnebago County by U.S. Marshals and the FBI. He was booked into the Winnebago County Jail yesterday afternoon. He'll now be sent to the Department of Corrections to begin his sentence. Arzate, along with Dakota Graff and Colton Kennicker, were all found guilty in the death of William Pickering. In 2019, Pickering was found dead in a field in rural Winnebago County. The three men beat him to death with a baseball bat.
William Pickering was only 23 years old. He was a son, a friend, and an artist chasing his dreams through music. His life ended in one of the most brutal murders Rockford has seen in years. But despite attempts to hide the crime, investigators was able to piece together what happened and hold those responsible accountable. Even after one of the defendants spent nearly 5 years on the run, justice continued to move forward. William's story remains to be a reminder of how quickly violence can destroy a promising future and the lasting pain left behind for the people who loved him. If you like true crime videos and you like to see more beyond the crime scene, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.